felt this was quite appropriate, rocking the American flag all the time in the shop. That's kind of what everything stands for in this country. I kind of like doing what I get to do, my freedoms, luxuries. So anyways, I won't ramble on anymore about that, but I fly that flag proudly. So anyways, without further ado, I want to do a quick little simple 101 tubing setup. This is a pretty basic piece. It's just a straight piece of tube. But the most difficult part is just figuring out angles and where you want to line up, where you want it to end, and where you want to notch at. So this is where it's going to ideally be laying, right about here. So I want to start off at the bottom just because it's the easiest flat point since I'm going to a flat surface down here on this plate. I'm just running the tube right next to the other tube. It's right here. And I'm going to tie this in such a way that it'll kind of spread out the load on this bracket rather than notching it and tying it into this tube. I would really like to spread out the load of any strain that may happen from a roll or anything like that. Which is another reason why I made them so large. This large bracket will kind of help display that load. And I'm going to do some gussets, kind of spray it out, fan it out, whatever you want to call it, to kind of help with that. So anyways, quick 101 on tubing. Try to show this the best that I can. But what I've done here is I've cut my tube to the general size that I need it to be. So I know I need to go at least above this tube in order to notch a 1 3/4 inch tube. A notch is about 7/8 inch deep into the tube. So anyways, what I do to start out is I draw a line on the end of the tube parallel with the tube, so straight down the center. So bisect the tube in the center. Then I trace that line to the front edge, leading edge of the tube, and then I cut straight across the tube. And I really just do this with an eyeball. These are kind of all just general reference points. So that way when you're working on this tube, you can really have a good idea of what you're doing the whole time. And then coming around to the other side of the tube, I do the same thing, draw a long straight line, because this is all going to get cut at angles or notched or whatever, and you really want to give yourself plenty of distance of that line to keep your reference point. You know, maybe you mess up 5 or 6 times and you want to cut it a bunch, and you know, you change something halfway through the project or halfway through this piece of tubing. So anyways, you want to line this up the best you can, so that way from this line to from this end of the tube at this line to the other end of the tube at this line, you want to try to line those up as best you can. You can use a tape measure, you can use a chalk line, you can use a straight edge, whatever you want to use if you really want to get particular, but I really don't get particular about it. I'm just kind of rough eyeballing it. It's nothing that's all that important. So that's your first step. You want to get your starting points, get your 180 degrees center section, whatever you want to call it, at the end of the tube, so that way you've got your lines here and here, so you can reference when you're in the tube notcher, or there's just a lot of different angles you got to get a good concept of to know what you're working with and what angles you want to cut and get set up. So that's at least, I would say, probably step 1. So all right, I guess I can probably call this step 2. Trying to show you the lines here so you can see the black Sharpie lines there on the tubing. Kind of hard to see. There you go. So step 2 is find your bottom flat angle. I've already found that on the one tube. These tubes are going to be identical essentially. And your second half of step 2, I guess, is find out the top, the angle that you want to make the top. So that tube and where it falls up here, the angle that I had drawn on that last tube is about that angle right there. Another reason for those lines that I was referring to at the end of the tube, here and here, is because you need to know a 90-degree angle on that tube when you make this notch. And it's hard to tell just simply based off the line on the top where that 90-degree angle is. So if you want, you can put a square right here. I don't have one right here readily available. But anyways, you can set a square on here and you can true this up with 90 degrees if it's that important to you. However, I've accounted for this to be a little long, so I expect that I'm going to be using these sweet little flap wheels to fine-tune the last little bit of this tube to fit in place. So step 3, notch your tube. Got to make that notch at that angle. Step 4, finish notch, perfect the tube, get it to line up right where you want it. Get ready for tack welding. Repeat on the other side. I think I'm on step 5. So step 5, land them, finish them, tack weld them, glue them, stick them, whatever you want to do. Just get them in there. There's that side down to there, and this side up to there. So that kind of gives you an idea what I'm going for here. So to wrap this all up, just know that I'm using the basic of all basic tools. Here's the next couple tubes I'm working on. I'm using nothing but a simple cutoff wheel and a cheap Porter cable drill and Harbor Freight tube notcher. I've got a Milwaukee drill, it's just in the house, but this is my backup, so I'm too lazy to go to the house, so I'm using the old cheap stuff. This dude right here built that entire Jeep. This grinder right here built that entire Jeep. Every notch, every tube, every cut, every plate of steel, everything right here. I did, however, have an old porta bandsaw that I used a little bit, but you get the idea. I'm just using basic stuff. It takes a long time. It's not fun. You got to clean up a lot. You got to protect yourself. You're going to get a lot of noise. You're going to get a lot of dust. You got to take care of yourself. So if this is something you guys are interested in, this is just a quick little 101 on some tube work. So a little bit of tube notching explanation. So this is an immediate right out of the tube notcher. You can see that there's a good bit of edge left on the tubing right here. This stuff's got to get trimmed off. Before you go putting this on, you can see that kind of sharp edge there. You want to trim that stuff off. That makes for a weak weld. You really want to make that a thicker piece of tube. So in order to make that feasible, you got to shave some of that off. You really don't want to be welding on this real thin stuff like this. You want to shave that off so that way when you weld, you're welding to a solid piece of tubing. See how this is much thicker over the span of that tube. Since this angle is so sharp right here, you're really not welding a thick piece of metal. So if I was to weld this, you'd almost kind of just burn through it, and it really wouldn't even be that effective. So you got to grind that edge off and get it down to where it's a thick piece of tube rather than real thin like that. So I'll show you here in a second. Alrighty, so here's the end result, what you want it to come out looking like. That is a much thicker piece of tubing to weld for the edge on. You want to kind of smooth out your edges, roll your edges a little bit too, kind of give yourself a little bit more play to fill in, a little bit more room to fill in. You obviously want to penetrate the metal enough to actually make a solid, strong weld. But anyways, you want to have a little bit of room to fill in as well, to fill in any gaps. Not everything's going to be perfect, so it's going to come out a little bit. The tolerances aren't going to be very tight, but this tube notcher and doing a little bit of grinding work like this, little flap wheel work, will certainly help make that tolerance a little tighter. So hope that helps.